Hello everybody. In this video we're going to try another example of a strict sequencing game. And the goal in this video is we're going to map it out, do our master sketch, and in the next video we'll tackle the questions that are associated with this scenario. But let's do a quick review first about how we know that this is what's called a strict sequencing game. So let me just mention that just for a minute. Strict sequencing really means stuff has to be placed in order, but there's really only one linear sequence allowed, right? Everything has to go in one exact slot. No slots are left empty, really no doubling up. That's what makes something strict sequencing. And we know that that's the case here with this game, because look what it says. There are exactly 7 houses on a street. Each house is occupied by exactly one of 7 families. And they give these here. All the houses are on the same side of the street, which runs from west to east. So we have this scenario, really, with just 7 houses stacked up in a row. We have 7 pieces, and we just have to figure out where we're supposed to place them. So let's do this. With a strict sequencing game, it's usually easiest to just draw out a little set of dashes indicating the slots that you have available for your players. We have 7 players. Let's do 7 slots. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, now they say that houses are all on the same side of the street, which runs from west to east. So let me just put this over here. Let's say that's the west end, and this is the east end of the street. Okay? And then now let's look at let's switch up a little bit. What players do we have? Very important always to keep track of that, because as we go through and place things, we want to pay attention to what kinds of players we have left. So let's see. We have the K's, the L's, the M's, the N's, the O's, R's, P's, and R's. O, P, and R. Okay. Yeah, and typically in good old LSAT fashion, they'll give you just sort of an alphabet soup of stuff. But let's see what our rules are. Okay. The R's do not live, so here's our first rule. The R's do not live in the first or last house on the street. Okay, so we can abbreviate that by stating that R can't be here and R cannot be there, leaving us a lot of spaces for where R is allowed, but that's okay. Okay, so that's the first rule. Check. Second rule, the Cons live in the 4th house from the west end of the street. Okay, so that tells us exactly where Con is. Con has to be here. So that means in our list, we can kind of scribble out K because we've placed it. It has to go there. All right, M. The M's live next to the Cons. Okay, so now look at this. That's not very specific. If we live next to K, there's 2 spaces where that could be, right? Now, there's a couple of different methods of thought about how you could list this. You could say, well, M can't be here, like I could write it like this. M can't be there, M can't be here, so on and so forth. When I have it just down to 2 spaces, I tend to just prefer to do something like this, just me personally. I would do something like M has to be either here or here. Okay? Now, I'm going to just pause on this one just for a moment, because this is a classic thing to look out for when you're doing an LSAT map. This is a pretty restrictive element, right? It's binary. So in a scenario, what I mean by that is that there's only 2 spaces where M can go, which means that if we are given an option of we have to try to play out a scenario, we would probably want to play around with M and see where all the other pieces would fall, because it's a lot more restricted about what our outcomes would be, right? Unlike, say, R, right? Because R could be technically here, so far, here, 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 or there. There's 4 different places that R can be at this point, whereas M can only have 2. So if I have a game where it's asking, okay, well, if I placed N over here, what might happen? I would try, running the scenario twice. I'd try putting M on one space and then, the N where it's supposed to go, and then try the other game where M is over here, and then play that out. That might not have made a lot of sense, but your takeaway here is that if you have an element in your game where you note that it can only go in one of 2 spaces, flag that. That's something that you can use later to narrow down your possibilities when you're doing some if scenarios. Okay, so I'm going to keep an eye out on M. I'm going to put a star right there. M is going to be an important piece, I have a feeling. All right, so we have M is taken care of, and then the last rule is a little bit weird. It says P lives east, so like further to the right, of both K and M, but west, further to the left, of L. Well, if I translate that, that would look something like this. We don't know exactly, in our scenario, whether M or K comes first, right? Because I could have KM, or I could have MK, so I kind of abbreviate that like that. But we do know they have to be right next to each other, so I kind of write that as M/K. But I know the P's have to be to the right of that, so I'm going to do ... P, because I don't know exactly how far away from M and K P is. They didn't specify, just somewhere to the east. Okay, but P is also to the west of L, meaning that it is to the left side of L. So I have a scenario like this. My rule structure states that I have to have M and K right next to each other, and then after them comes P, and after P comes L. Being unspecified, where those spaces are. But remember, we talked about this in class. That's a block of 4. It's a barest minimum. I need to have at least just minimum 4 spaces in order to make this rule work between M and K. So that would mean, think about our scenarios. Let's suppose M was here, right? That means I have to put P and L over here somewhere, leaving me one space, unspecified which one out of the 3, that I could use to put another piece in. But I would have to, P and L have to be over in here somewhere. So let me take that out for a second. All right, but if I put M over here, the only other option for M, I am going to have to put P here and L right there. No choice, right? Because there's no other way to fit P and L after K and M unless I use up those slots. So that's a very restrictive block right there, and quite helpful in solving this game. So I would try to translate that in terms of where I can place P and L. You could again put, I can't put P here, can't put P there, can't, so on and so forth. That would take a lot of time. I think I would just abbreviate that, something like this. I know P and L have to be somewhere after K, right? It might be over here or here, it might be here and there if M is over here, but I know that they have to come somewhere in this block of 3 right there. Okay, that's as far as I'm going to go with the sketch for this game. All right, this is really about the only information that we have. Other than, one thing I would note is that you want to, after you've done all this, you'd want to take a look at what your free players are, the ones that did not have any restrictions on them. Let's think about this. We have a restriction on L. We placed K for sure. M is also pretty restrictive. P, we know it has to be somewhere over in these last 3 spaces. And R, not very restrictive, but we do know it can't be at either end of the spectrum. The only pieces we have that we didn't say anything about are N and O. So those are, we kind of call those like our free players. Those are the ones that you really could just place just about anywhere. That's going to be important as we look at the questions. So for the summary here is, this would be our map, our sketch for it. We've placed these pieces, that we've identified our most restrictive element. Arguably it's M. And then we have also P and L can only be in these spaces here. And then with that information down, we should be able to handle the questions without too much difficulty. Pause the video, maybe take a review over this, see if this makes sense to you before we launch into the next video.